Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Tatiana Show, and I'm doing a special broadcast from Chicago for the Distributed Markets Conference put on by my friends at BTC Media. They are also hosts to the LTB Network, so it's extra special getting to hang with my peeps from the LTB crew, and I'm making some new friends. One of them is Rick Dudley. I saw him at the Matt Rozak dinner yesterday, and now here we are. We're going to get down to it. He's from a company called Vulcanize, and tell me all about it.
Yeah, so Vulcanize is a consultancy. We help people with blockchain architectures. So primarily we focus on federated proof-of-stake systems that have some sort of two-way peg to Ethereum or some other chain, like maybe our chain. Right now,
what does that mean? So a lot of my audience members are new to the space, and I'm always trying to refresh me. So if you could just explain a little bit, what is a federated system?
So you can look at, unfortunately, there's a lot of factions for such a small community. So in the sort of Bitcoin public permissionless space, those are the terms they use. Then in the private permissioned federated consortia space, those are the terms that are used. So, for example, the idea of a private blockchain doesn't really make any sense. Most of the time when people are talking about a private blockchain, what they really mean is a permissioned blockchain. So people from the permissioned space use permissioned. People from the public or permissionless space tend to use the word private because they're being somewhat disparaging. But federated systems just means that you have some number of pre-selected validators or miners who are validating or underwriting the transactions on that network.
Okay, cool. I think I understood that. I mean, I did already, of course. It wasn't for my audience. So you've been an OG in this space. So what have you guys been working on? Because you've been doing a ton of stuff for a long time.
Yeah, so I was looking at creating sort of like digital scarcity or virtual items that were unique by using cryptography. I was doing that in 2007, so that's when I filed my patent, February 2007. So yeah, so you can look, so if you look up my legal name, you can find the patent and stuff. But so that's how I started thinking about sort of digital items and digital scarcity. I wasn't super interested in Bitcoin for a number of reasons that I'll keep it friendly. And then in November of 2014, some friends of mine asked me to evaluate Ethereum. So I went to an Ethereum meetup in New York City where I met Vitalik, Gavin, Yunta, a bunch of the core devs, Joe Lubin. And then I started talking to Joe Lubin more regularly in an attempt to develop my patent, commercialize the patent. That was sort of the hope. And so then in February 2015, I started working at Consensus. But I had a background I worked with people who did high frequency trading, so I knew about low latency networks, high frequency trading. I worked with people who did fault tolerant, massively write networks like Cassandra, Riak on the database side, so I knew about Paxos and I knew about consensus algorithms that were used in databases. And I was interested in cryptography from the 90s, so I already knew all these pieces. So when it was explained to me, I was like, oh yeah, I was bringing up these questions to them. I was like, well, how do you feel about Paxos? Like, how do you feel about this? How do you feel about that? When I was talking to the Ethereum team the first time I met them. So I'm kind of a late I guess I was mining Litecoin at some point. I don't even remember what year that was, but it was before I worked at Consensus. So I dabbled in different things in the space, but I wasn't really like serious committed in the space until like February 2015. And then since then, almost all of my work has, with a brief stint as some work for hire stuff, it's all been blockchain related since then. And in the last 2 years, I've done over 20 projects. So projects include white paper reviews, mechanism design, writing white papers, sort of like with my name on them and without my name on them, so sort of like ghostwriting stuff. So I do a lot of different things in the space. My main project right now is what I call Byzantine fault tolerant database. So that's different from a blockchain in that basically what we're trying to do is we're trying to add another layer of guarantees and verification on top of a more traditional massive write database like a React or a Cassandra or a Cockroach DB. So we're taking those sorts of technologies and we're integrating that with blockchains, so that what you can do is you can now create a caching layer between the blockchain and your application. So if you have a normal web app, like a normal React-based web app that expects to talk to GraphQL, we expose a GraphQL endpoint, and we have cached. What we do is the pitch is you have in a normal database, enterprise database infrastructure, you have something called ETL, extract, transform, and load. And so what that does is you extract the data from one database, you transform it in an application, then you load it into another database. What we do is a little different from that. We extract the data from the Ethereum blockchain for the time being, but really any blockchain. You then load that data into Postgres. And then each application developer specifies their own transformation on an application-specific level. Once you've done that, you now have a caching layer between that application's end users and the blockchain, which improves performance. I mean, literally searches that might take weeks can now happen in seconds. I mean, these are literal time differences. Like when you run certain searches on the Ethereum blockchain, it can take on a normal machine an extremely long time, both to sync the chain and then to actually run the search. We get all of that just using traditional database techniques, nothing crazy, no magic. We can get that down to a fixed time of a couple of seconds or less, like sub-second result times. And then once you have that cache, that individual cache as a standalone instance, we can then use consensus technology, Tendermint in this case, to then federate those. So there's a step in the middle that I left out, which is that all the result sets that are stored in this database are now also content addressable. Because the data that we started with is hashed data, we can now verify that data in a cryptographic way. And so what that means is that you can now federate and potentially monetize the transfer of this data between people. So if you want to, so there's a concrete example, because this is somewhat, I just jumped right into the weeds there, but a concrete example of this would be, I'm trying to think of someone that's not a client. Let's say you had some pictures, and you, like a lot of pictures, and you wanted to monetize those pictures. You could create a system using this model where you had a smart contract on Ethereum that gated the payment for those pictures through a web app. Mm-hmm. And that cache would be very efficient. It would be like a normal CDN, except now that CDN can take payments via Ethereum. So people would pay per byte. So that's an example of the type of system that's possible on top of Vulcanize DB.
Wow, that's really neat. Did you get a chance to talk about it at this conference, or where are you guys at,
No.
In terms of sharing that with people? Are people able to take advantage of that yet? Or
well, the code's open source,
okay.
So the code's at github.com/vulcanize/vulcanizedb, and you can, it works. Not all the pieces that I described now are written. I mean, but we're writing them all. We have, it's based on client demand. So as the company's clients request features, we add them in. And so the monetization piece will probably be handled in the future by other projects. Vulcanize DB will sort of be focused not on the monetization layer. We're going to be working below that layer, again, servicing clients. But yeah, so that's where you can learn more about it. Unfortunately, I'm not a great documentation writer, so we're very light on the documentation. We have a Gitter channel. You can get in the Gitter channel, it's a public channel, and talk to us and ask us about stuff. And we're going to be building some demos pretty soon. So we're going to build a decentralized or federated block explorer, open source block explorer, because there's a lot of demand for that. And so I'm going to start working on that.
Wow, you're a busy guy.
I mean, that's not half the stuff I do, but well, that's about half of the stuff I do.
All right, I like knowing at least the half. We'll have to catch up again and do the next half.
Yeah.
Are you in New York too?
Yes.
This is where all the cool people are. I'm giving Crystal a look. She's like, no.
Where are you?
In New York. Oh. Well, actually, I'm in New Jersey, so I'm just
you're
pretending.
Close to cool.
I'm close to cool. There's still time for me to improve it. Thanks so much for coming on the show. I hope we can link up again
Thanks
soon.
for having me.